All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College EWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been going over and creating a series of video presentations based on the Mozilla Developer Network's Learn Web Development series. I'm currently in the CSS module talking about CSS layout, and it's time to go to floats. Before we do, to show you where we are, we did the layout review, we've done the intro, the normal, the flexbox, and the grid. So we're up to floats. After this, so we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth one in, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to go. All right. So originally for floating images inside of blocks of text, the float property became the common way of doing this. With the advent of Flexbox and Grid, it's now returned to its normal purpose or its original purpose, as is explained in here. The float property, as it says, was introduced to allow developers to implement simple layouts involving an image floating inside of a column of text. For example, text wrapping around an image or to the left or to the right of it. But web developers quickly realized you could float anything and not just images. All right, it says, for example, to create layout effects such as drop caps. All right, something like this. Floats have commonly been used to create entire website layouts. There are newer, better techniques, and that's what we've talked about in the two previous lessons. So, as mentioned here, in this article, they're going to talk about what they consider to be the more proper uses of floats. So, as it says here, let's explore how to use floats. We'll start with a very simple example involving floating a block of text around an element. It says you can follow along by creating a new index.html file and filling it with a simple template right here. So as always, I'm going to come back in, and that has become my new download file. Not much in here, just a paragraph that says this is my page. There you go, not much. First, we'll start off with some simple HTML. So add the following to the body, removing anything that was previously in the body. Alrighty. That was just that simple paragraph. So boom, that's gone. So let's see what that did. All right, so we've got, as you can see, simple float example. Now apply the following CSS to your HTML using the style element or linking to a separate file. So what do we have? The width should be 90% with a maximum width of 900 pixels. The text, everything should be centered on screen. We're using a Helvetica font, and we've got a box in here. So we've got dimensions for it, 150 by 100, 5 pixel border radius on there, a background color, and some padding. All right, so let's bring that in. We will add that as style tags. So there that is. As always, let's just pretty it up just a little bit here. All right. So what did that do? All right. Now you've got float in a box, and we changed the font size and the font type, but not too much else. So the box is sitting above the text in normal flow. To float the text around it, add the float and the margin right properties to the box rule. So we're going to add just these two things. It doesn't matter where in here you add these. There's no order that you need to put in here. And this was supposed to go in, I'm sorry, the box. Alrighty. So we've got float left with a margin right of 15 pixels. And again, immediate feedback. There you go. So again, imagine this was a picture or something like that. You wanted to float the text around it. You'd be able to do that. And let's look at it. Okay, looks pretty good. Says, let's think about how float works. The element with the float set on it, the div in this case, is taken out of the normal layout flow and then stuck to the left-hand side of the parent, which is the body. Any content that comes below it will now fill up around it, filling the space to the right as much as it can, and then basically moving down. It says there it will stop. All right. So floating the content to the right has exactly the same effect, but in reverse. Try changing it to right, margin right, and replace margin right with margin left. All right. So we will replace this with right, and we will replace this with left. Save it. How should it look different? Well, you should already be able to figure this out. What should happen is this picture will go over there, and everything else is going to float around it. So there you go. Okay. While we can add a margin to the float to push the text away, we can't add a margin to the text to move it away from the float. That is because the floated element is taken out of the normal flow, and the boxes of the following items actually run behind the float. You can demonstrate this by making the following changes. Add a class of special to the first paragraph, and then in CSS, add this. Now we're attempting the background color. That's not a biggie, but it's the padding that's going to screw this up. So let's check. So to this first paragraph, we are going to add a class that is equal to special. All right, then in here, we're going to add the special class. Now just to prove to you what I've already said, that is, I'm going to take this padding, that line, just that line, and I'm going to comment it out. All right, let's see if we get the background color and the text changed. Okay. Yep, no problem, right? Everything looks cool. Now again, I still got it floating on the right. We could move it to the left. It's no biggie one way or the other. But it's the padding that's going to screw this up. And again, just to show you that, let's uncomment this. Save. Okay. Now it didn't work like that on here, so let's see. So to make this effect, change the margin right on your float to just margin. Oh, so we get space all the way around. That's the problem. All right, let's change this back to the way it used to look. In other words, we're going to make this float left, and we're going to have this a margin right. And in fact, they want this to just be margin, I believe, not margin right. Just a margin on there. All right, so now let's check it out and see what it looks like. All right, not exactly what you'd expect, not exactly what I at least believe you would want. All right, just put the padding in. All right, but it's basically now kind of move this to the background, so to speak, with the image in the foreground, again, so to speak. The line boxes of our following element have been shortened so the text runs around the float, due to the float being removed from the normal flow. Okay. All right. I did mention this in a much earlier lesson, but I'm going to say it again, and that is when you set up a float, the float stays in effect as long as, until you turn it off. So what most people do is they make a class that they either call clear, here they call it cleared, but the idea is this is going to clear the left float. All right, you can clear right, you can clear left, or you can clear both. So if we put this in here, we've got cleared. Let's take a look once. Okay, and you can see what that looks like. But I think they want us to come down to the second paragraph here. So first, let's come in and add that class, the cleared class. Now, you can do this, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm just going to say both here, which will also work, which means that if there's any right floating, we'll get rid of it. If there's any left floating, we'll get rid of it. All right, and it's a class of cleared. So we'll come down to here, and we'll say class equal cleared. All right, and that cleared the float. So it's only acting or interacting in here. And again, if we were to come back in here and change this, instead of margin all the way around, if we change that to margin right, then we pretty much have got this looking kind of the way we want it to look. All right. Again, the clear property accepts left, right, or both. We could have just said left in there as well, and it should have worked just fine. All right. So clearing boxes wrapped around a float. It says you now know how to clear something following a floated element, but let's see what happens if you have a tall float in a short paragraph with a box wrapped around both elements. Change your document so that the first paragraph and our floated box are both wrapped in a div with a class of wrapper. So we want both of these, this div and this paragraph, to be in here. All right, that will probably necessitate us changing the CSS around too, and it does. All right, in addition, we'll remove the cleared class. So we'll put this into the wrapper. We'll have that background color. We'll have padding of 10 pixels, and it'll have white font color. So it tells us to get rid of this and then just put in this. Not sure if that's what they wanted or not. Let's take a quick look. You will see that just like in the example where we put a background color on the paragraph, the background color runs behind the float. Think of the other reason that that's the case. All right. This, remember, a paragraph is a block level item. Okay. All right. Once again, this is because the float has been taken out of the normal flow. Clearing the element doesn't help with this box clearing, where you want the bottom of the box to wrap around the floated item and wrapping content, even if the content is shorter. So it says there's 3 ways you can potentially fix this. Number 1, it says the way that this situation has traditionally been dealt with is what's known as the clear fix hack. In other words, you do something that works, but really it probably isn't within the realm of for lack of better words, what do I say here? The way you would normally do it. How's that? So add the following CSS to the example. So this is wrapper after. All right. And let's take a look at how that looks. Oh, that looks better, right? And they're putting the color in here for effect and to show things, but we could remove the color if we wanted to as well. All right. So as it says, when you reload the page, the box should clear. This is essentially the same as had you added an element such as a div below it and set it to clear both. That's kind of an important thing because this is typically how I do it. So what I want to do is I want to go back in here and I'm going to actually, for now at least, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to comment it out. And let's create a class that we'll just call both. And we'll say clear both. All right. Then I'll come back in here and after the div, I'm going to add another div. Well, we've got this for the paragraph, but I'm going to put it in here as a div. And I'm going to say div class equal both div. Now, if this works, it should look exactly the same after I refresh the screen. So this should not change. And it does not change. That's the way I typically do it. I don't use that hack. I just come in and add a div, and I set it as shown there. Okay. An alternative method is to set the overflow property of the wrapper to a value other than visible. So here we're setting it to auto. So it says remove the clear fix you added in the last section and instead add the overflow auto rules to the wrapper. Once again, the box should clear. Well, let's check. So now I will take my both class that's in here. I will comment it out. And I will actually get rid of that div that I put in right here. And again, let's see if once I refresh this, if it still looks exactly the same. And it does. Another way of doing that. All right. Finally, it says this example works by creating what is known as a block formatting context or a BFC, like a mini layout inside of the page. The modern way of solving this is to use the flow root of the display property. So they want us to come in here and say display flow root. So let's go back, and I think that we've got that in there. Everything else should be okay. And once again, if this works, we should be able to come over here and refresh, and it should look exactly the same. And it does. All right. So there's the test your skills. Always a good idea to go through these. And as it says, you now know what you need to know about floats. See the article on legacy layout methods to see on how they're used. And they'll be around. They're not going anywhere. So we've now done our intro, our normal flow, flexbox, grids, and floats. So it's time to move on. We're about halfway through with this section. So we're going to move on to positioning. position values and how to use them. And I'll be there with that in just a moment.